our public libraries, and then we do them like this, where we pick a small business where we can kind of have a more of an informal conversation. Dave, can you get them to take the music down? Go with the music. Also, one of the things that we traditionally do when we have a lot of participation is we have like a sign-in sheet or cards to fill out. All I'll ask is, hopefully we don't need to do that, and if you just raise your hand and everyone is polite and respectful of one another, we'll just do it informally, and I can do my best to answer questions. I don't need people's addresses or really fully, just all I ask is your name and what town you live in. You don't need to be from Southeast to be here. You can be from anywhere in Putnam County, and that way we kind of get the best value out of this. I'll just introduce a few folks that I know that are here that have served in county government. So Dane Pasquicello is my chief of staff. He worked with Senator Rollison for many years. He set up this little Mevo camera that I think is just filming it just in case we try to post it sometimes later on. If you have a problem being filmed, just avoid the camera, I guess. But it's basically so in case anyone wanted to participate couldn't be here, we try to do that wherever we can remotely. I live stream my public hearings before I pass local laws. It's something that I did again when I was in the assembly. It's something I advocated for in county government. We want to make county government more affordable, accountable, and accessible to all of our residents. And that's something I strive for every day I go to the office. This is a 365, 24/7 operation in county government. You call 911, you expect someone to answer at our dispatch center. We have, snowstorms, all sorts of emergencies. So it's important that we're accessible. And that means a lot of different things to me. It means making our digital platforms, our website more accessible, which we have done. The county clerk, Michael Bartolotti, is here. He's done a remarkable job in digitizing records as the county clerk. But we've also done a lot to improve how we can engage with residents. The legislature, after many years of advocacy, they've now updated their platforms and live stream their public meetings and their committee meetings, which is awesome. It's something that many of us have advocated for a long time. And quite frankly, when you roll out a new IT or technological advancement, it might sound simple, but it does take some time. So while I would have loved to have that happen years ago, I'm very happy that's happening now. On the budget side, because people ask, what's your biggest responsibility as a county executive? Look, the biggest responsibility, there's many, but the biggest responsibility is witnessed and visible in the county budget. That's where your priorities are going to be shown. So when I say accountable, accessible, and affordable really, for me, talks about the tax burden, right? So we live in New York where we have one of the biggest tax burdens of any state in the nation. We are consistently ranked as one of the most overburdened, overtaxed states in the country. We have one of the worst rankings for economic outlook. All you have to look is at rich states, poor states, or at the Tax Foundation's rankings each and every year. I think we were actually 48th last year for business climate in Tax Foundation's rankings. We were ahead of New Jersey, and now we're behind New Jersey again. So we kind of jockey back and forth for 48th and 49th. So look, I'm not going to be able to control the income tax burden that you have as an employee. I'm not going to be able to control the unfunded mandates that come out of Albany. But when we do have the ability to lessen the burden at the county level, and we have the means to do it, I believe we should. And that's because we're always striving to do better. So in our budget, we've done a number of really important things. We've honored our commitments to all of our public employees, about 700 employees. When I took office, we had the 4 collective bargaining units were either out of contract or had an expiring contract at the end of the year. All 4 collective bargaining units now have multi-year contracts. We've been able to honor our commitment to those contracts, which is really important to them and their families so they can plan their retirement and their future. But it's also important for our taxpayers because we got to know what our financial obligations are for the years ahead. So we got all that done in a relatively short period of time. We've settled a lot of outstanding litigation settlements that we inherited. Some that date back to the Peekskill Hollow Road project over in Putnam Valley, which was a major undertaking. The road was ripped open, bridges open just 100 yards from the Putnam Valley School that led to litigation. Got that done. There was litigation tied to some of the bridges here in Southeast. If you've noticed, the walkway over the Maybrook Trail that goes from the Connecticut state line all the way up to Poughkeepsie and over the walkway over the Hudson. There's a bridge that connects it, and it's behind Brewster Honda. That's now been completed, and you can check it out and walk over it yourself. But there's been a lot of different hurdles. Our budget honors all those commitments, all of our essential services. It's invested more in capital projects, relies less on borrowing. It invests in new studies to bolster our transportation systems with potentially microtransit, paratransit service. It allows us to enhance services in 911, specifically our 911 system for community paramedicine, which is something I hope I get to talk about as someone that volunteered and worked in EMS for years before I ran an elected office. We were the first in 1998 as a county to have a county-wide advanced life support system, which was a paramedic service county-wide. Now, with this paramedicine service, we're going to be the first county to have a county-funded, county-wide paramedicine program, which is also a really exciting thing. But what's really the biggest accomplishment is we did all of that while cutting our property tax levy by $1 million, which is the biggest property tax levy reduction in county history. In doing so, we drove the property tax rate down, the mill rate, to $2.39 for $1,000 of assessed property, which is the lowest mill rate or property tax rate in nearly 20 years. And why I find that so important is because it dates back to 2007. So we're now back at a point where it's at pre-recession levels, which I think is really important because in 2007 and in 2008, the county had to endure the largest property tax increase in the county's history. So that's for a lot of reasons. Look, we've been able to leverage sales tax revenue, but we've also prioritized our spending, and it's also because we're investing smartly in our capital projects, and we're also looking at things like if we're going to lessen sales tax to make it less regressive, we're doing it in a targeted, responsible way, and one of those ways is an exemption on clothing and footwear. And for all of you that are going to go shopping on Black Friday after Thanksgiving when you spend time with your family and friends, please know that if you buy clothing or footwear under $110, there are zero sales tax charges in Putnam County. So if you go to Kohl's or Marshall's and you want to buy a shirt for somebody or something like that, you're not going to pay sales tax. But importantly, if you go on Amazon and you buy online and you're a Putnam County resident, you are going to have zero surcharge on those items. That's what makes sales tax less regressive in Putnam County, because it is a regressive tax. I prefer consumption-based taxation, but the reality is the wealthiest of the wealthy and the poorest of the poor will both pay that sales tax. So that exemption makes it less regressive. It gives people meaningful relief, particularly at a time where the cost of goods and services are so high. So those are just some of the accomplishments that you may have read about more recently, things that I've been talking about. But I know there's, like I said, I want to be able to listen to you all, try to answer some of your questions and concerns. So if that's okay, what we'll start with is raising a hand. And I'll just say again, our incoming legislator-elect, Tommy Regan. Thanks for being here, Tommy. Just say your first, last name, what town you're from, and then I'll do my best to answer questions. And I'll try not to be too long-winded. I apologize. Dane will kick me in my shins if I go on too long. Tommy, go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Tommy Regan from Southeast. Executive, you made a big announcement personnel-wise this week. You want to talk about the work that went into it, put a lot of work into that decision, and possibly what led up to the person that you chose?
Sure. So one of the things that I have done as somebody coming in, we had a lot of transitional change to the new executive back in January 2023, because we do have this issue with a lot of folks that have been serving in county government in leadership levels reaching retirement age. And some would say it's a brain drain, right? So you want to make sure that you position people for success. And we've had change in Commissioner of Finance. We've had changes in the Director of Office of Senior Resources. Our Personnel Director is announcing his retirement early next year. But we also had changes in the Bureau of Emergency Services. Bob Lipton, who was a Deputy Commissioner on and off about 10 years, and he was a battalion chief or a coordinator, whoever you want to talk to, for Carmel area for many years. Bob Lipton's retired. He's moving to Arizona. And what I have done when we have to select top leadership positions is I rely on an interview committee that I appoint to help advise me. We post all of these positions, and then I empower them to interview and score all of the candidates. Personnel helps us make sure that they're all qualified. And then I typically take the top, I look at all of the resumes, I look at all the score sheets. So if in the off chance that I really disagree with the interview committee, and on rare occasions I've gone a little bit I've deviated when the score is so close, like if it's a fraction of 1%, well, I'm gonna make that decision anyway, ultimately it's on me, so I'll meet with them both to make that decision. But that interview committee that we selected for the Bureau of Emergency Services Commissioner included legislator Erin Crowley, because she's the legislative liaison for the Fire Advisory Board and EMS Board. It included Jerry Stramick, who's a fire commissioner for the Brewster Fire District, also happens to be the former chief investigator for the sheriff's office. It included the personnel officer, Paul Eldridge, and it included my deputy county executive, Jim Burpo. And Mike Mikulski, who is a very well-respected EMS professional from the Putnam Valley Ambulance Corps, has a very busy career down in Montefiore Health System, down in the Bronx, and used to be the president of the EMS Council. So those folks helped vet some of those early candidates. We had some top contenders that I met with. Ultimately, I fell on choosing and selecting Jim Oster. Jim Oster has a great reputation in Putnam County. He's a lifelong resident of Putnam, grew up here, went to Carmel schools, the whole bit. But his EMS and his emergency services background dates back to the 90s when he volunteered, ironically, my own fire department, but I wasn't active with the department at that time, so I didn't really know Jim. It was in the 90s. He became the EMS lieutenant of the Kent Fire Department. And then his career was really within the Kent Police Department. He moved up to the position of lieutenant. He also led the emergency response team with the sheriff's office and local agencies for Putnam County. He's worked with the 911 committee over the years. And for the last decade or so, he's worked in the private sector, working on a lot of different investigations on the private side with more crime analysis and post-accident, forensics, things like that. But Jim has come highly recommended, and I very much value and respect the volunteer fire service. But one of the things I felt the Bureau needs is that level of career professionalism brought to the Bureau, because yes, it's important to have the support for all the training that we do, the fire training center, all the forums, all the classes, but it's probably, I view, one of the biggest, most important responsibilities of the Bureau of Emergency Services is that 911 center. And it is a career, it is a vocation, it is a very difficult job. People are sitting or standing behind their desks for long hours. So having someone with that discipline and that background, I think will be very helpful. And I think we're very fortunate that Jim is going to have seasoned professionals to support him, and Ralph Balloon, who's been our deputy commissioner for the last several years. Ralph is a former career firefighter over in Stamford, Connecticut. He was a volunteer fire chief in Cold Spring, also happened to be the mayor of Cold Spring years ago, was a battalion chief over there, coordinator. And Chris Shields is the emergency management director, who has had a career, used to be a Capitol police officer, and worked in Homeland Security with the federal government. And then, of course, anyone who's been in EMS in Putnam County knows Bob Cuomo. I think he's like the guru, like the czar of EMS for New York State. I am so grateful that we were able to entice him to come back to Putnam County. He has been just absolutely remarkable. I think he's, people can question decisions, but no one's going to question his motives or his intent. And he's done a remarkable job. So I think Jim's set up for success. It's a long answer, but it's an important question. Thank you. Yes, sir.
I want to
Just name
Tom Rossetti from
Tom.
Carmel Hamlet, and we've got a real situation where citizens in the area are really scared because they're going to be putting another mental health facility, the stabilization center, right next to where the community actually is. We've got 80% of all of the mental health services of the county in 3% of the county in this one area. It's become a dumping ground for all of these different facilities. We've had attacks in the area. People are getting harassed over in the shopping center where they don't want to go over there at this point. And we found out that the person who did attack, of course, got out on their catch and release here and didn't show up again for what they've got. But he was also camping out on the trail in a tent provided by the county at that point. So that was what we were told at the last meeting. So the town is abetting and bringing everything down into a central area that really is overwhelmed by it right now. And it's got the citizens scared because it's something where there's way too much of it right in the one area where you've got people who are fragile. Again, it's a senior community. This center was supposed to have been right here in this building, but it was moved because there was a daycare center where the attack was, which was not far from the center, was right behind another daycare over there. So these facilities are right in this one area of town. It's really becoming tough, and even though there's overwhelming sentiment to not have this, again, not to not have the center, but don't place it on top of everything else that's been put into the county in this one area, which is creating a nuisance for having people being harassed just to go shopping. And they're not going to even use the stores in the area. They'll go out of our own area just because of the fact that there's just no safety that they feel over there.
So what I'll say is, thank you for acknowledging the attack. No one should feel unsafe going on to the rail trail, the Putnam Trail, or any of our parks or any of our public spaces. It's unacceptable, and the fact that that person was arrested, released on an appearance ticket, and then of course particularly didn't show back up to his court date reflects poorly on the state's laws. So I appreciate you recognizing that. There is no stabilization center right now, so I don't think it's fair to attribute that attack to the center, but I understand the sentiment that there's a concern about other facilities. Yeah, I understand that. So just specifically to that point, one of the things I want to just help alleviate those concerns. One of the things that we were doing, I have done working with our new sheriff, Brian Hess, is we've ramped up police patrolling of the trail. I think it's important. And for folks in Brewster, they know that they've had similar issues not far from Colbackers, and a lot of that had to do with that bridge being closed, because once that infrastructure wasn't there, it created like this almost cul-de-sac where like people just would tent. So we'll send in DPW, we'll send in the law enforcement to try to shut those places down and make sure they get connected to services. The county has contracts with, they can offer humanely services to support them if they take them, and that includes temporary housing in some of the motels or hotels until they can get introduced to better services. We also, because of Sheriff Hess's support, have camera technology that's being put up at certain sensitive areas on the trail, and that's because he was able to get additional support from Westchester County, and then we're going to try to purchase additional equipment. So that, just for that one concern. As far as the tent goes, as soon as that was brought to my attention, according to our DSS commissioner, that was a long-standing practice that was not frequently utilized, but as soon as it was brought to my attention, we ended that policy permanently. We do not do that. Unfortunately, the only way it was brought to my concern was after the fact that it's, but I don't think we should be enabling, homelessness encampments by giving out tents. I think that's a really bad policy. So as soon as it was brought to my attention, it was ended permanently. As far as the stabilization center, this county does community health needs assessments every several years, and every time we do this, we're one of the healthiest, safest counties in America, and we're very proud of that. That doesn't mean that we're without crime. It doesn't mean we're without needs. The top two things that are always consistently highlighted is public transportation. Now, a lot of folks here have the ability of vehicles, right, to commute, but it's public transportation and it's mental health services. There are mental health services in other parts of the county. It's not all in the Hamlet of Carmel. For example, so we have, but I just want to make sure we have Rose House. There's several facilities over in Garrison. Graymore's in Garrison. The Phillipstown Hub is in Phillipstown, Cold Spring. That's on Route 9. There's the Mental Health Association clinic and peer support organization over in Southeast, not far from, across from Kelly's Pub, up in that facility. Not far from McDonald's in that general area. We also have Open Doors, which is a federally qualified health center in the village of Brewster. There are other facilities, but yes, Cove Care, which is a nonprofit that partners with the county, which if we didn't have Cove Care, it would just be a county-run operation because they're mandated functions, the mental health services for the county to provide, but we contracted out. It's something that Executive Bob Botany started in the 90s, which I think was very smart. It saves us money. But their location is actually a county building, not far from the trail off Route 6. You also have the other facility you're talking about is Arms Acres, which is a for-profit facility, which the county really doesn't have control over. They opened up a separate clinic where I think the Comcast building was near Spins. I take my son to Spins all the time. My wife was with him and his godfather at the arcade the other day. We go there all the time. The Board of Elections is right next door to that too. And I know there's some concerns about that clinic. And I understand specifically the Hamilton Carmel community, particularly the retreat and those that live off Seminary Hill Road, a lot of them have had a sour experience with Arms Acres over the years, and I get that. Some of my best friends growing up from when I went to Carmel High School, 25 years ago, lived on Seminary Hill Road on Mechanic Street, right in that general area. We try with our new director of mental health to provide a level of oversight there. We bolster our mental health services team in the county to try to assist there, but they are a for-profit, so there's a limitation there. The stabilization center in itself is an entirely different type of service, which I think is important to note wherever it is ultimately located, if it's located somewhere at this point. It is one that is designed to be 24/7, but it is not designed for those who are in moments of severe crisis where they should be going to an emergency department or they should be incarcerated from law enforcement professionals. But there are people, unfortunately, because they don't know where to go, they'll go to a hospital when they really shouldn't be there, or they'll be waiting for days to get help. Or maybe they go to an urgent care facility where they can't get help, but the urgent care is closed. So the stabilization center does not give medications, it does not give methadone, it does not give any of those treatments. They were designed to have their own security when there's an overnight operation. That's all part of their design. Yes, the original location was supposed to be upstairs. Well, the original location was conceptually, my predecessor, I should say, the county committed about $2.5 million of federal money to a stabilization center with the thought of it being at Putnam Hospital. Unfortunately, while a commitment and a dedication was made by my predecessor in the legislature by a resolution, there was no contract and there was no commitment from the hospital. We have followed up repeatedly with the hospital. I honestly thought the best location would be the sleep center building. Keeping on the hospital campus, but a separate building would be nice because you don't want them to feel like they're going into an emergency room. That kind of defeats the purpose. Unfortunately, the hospital, after lots of follow-up, they didn't have any space available. So despite what people may say, that's just not true. We also looked at the barns, we looked at lots of facilities. The spot upstairs we looked at and we wanted because there used to be a separate mental health service and clinic up there. For those familiar, we used to have the Joseph B. Dwyer program up there with the Mental Health Association of Putnam. But part of my job, is we don't just run roughshod over people. We have to listen to people. We have to have forums like this, right? So when we did that, we had multiple forums. The legislature was updated at public meetings where the people can participate in. There were public statements and postings in the paper. But ultimately, we also had a forum at the TOPS building, the Bureau of Emergency Services, where people can come back and speak their piece. And you're right, there was lots of parents who drop off their child there who were very concerned because it's a shared entry and exit where their facility is going to be. And at the end of the day, again, part of my job is listening to that feedback. And for the stabilization center to succeed, it needs to have community support. It just needs to have community support. I can't force it in a community that's not going to accept it. So, the town of Southeast passed a temporary moratorium that's probably expired by now. I am not going to be the county executive that gets in frivolous, costly litigation with a nonprofit that we're trying to support and a local municipality. I'm not doing it. I'm not going to. So that's just one way to destroy relationships. It's also, and it's not, I don't think it's good government. So they went to look out for an alternative location. The site that they settled on as a secondary location is in between the Taco Bell and the credit union. It's in between the credit union and the Taco Bell. The retreat is next to the credit union, so to speak. It's got a separate driveway with a chiropractor's office upstairs. It's now vacant downstairs, but does anyone know what was down there before?
Yeah.
Anyone gonna giggle? It was a foot spa that had late hours with ladies of the night coming in at 4 o'clock in the morning. So I don't really feel like, I thought this was like a better like service area to help people. But I understand if people have concerns. And the reality is, there is a need for a stabilization center. There is a need for mental health services. We've added staff in the county. We have a mobile crisis response team now that we contract with People USA for. We do other things. I want to have a stabilization center in Putnam County. The contract that we have with People USA, just to effectuate the delivery of those funds, right? They need to have one in Putnam. It doesn't say where it needs to be. So, but the federal guidance for us to not lose that money says it does need to be spent by the end of 2026. So the reality is, at this point in time, People USA, we're partners in that we're both trying to enhance mental health services in the county. But it's their application. They have an application before the town planning board. I spoke at their first public hearing. They closed the public hearing. They reopened the public hearing. I kind of question, the mechanism of them opening it, but I agree with them reopening it because I think otherwise you'd have a mob, and the reality is you have a public outcry. They want to be heard. They deserve to be heard. The second public hearing had a much bigger mix. They had a lot more opposition. There was opposition at the first public hearing. People from the retreat were there, but there was a lot more at the second one. At the end of the day, I spoke in that first public hearing. I first got involved in government coming back from college, serving as a volunteer member on the town planning board in Putnam Valley. And that is where local decision making really needs to happen, at that local level. So I've always respected local control. I think the local town planning board, I thanked them for reopening the public hearing. They even said they were going to extend public comment in writing. I think it was for submission till the end of yesterday. Ultimately, I think the stabilization center at that location, proposed location, will live or die at the town planning board. Right now, I'm not sure what's going to happen. If I was a betting man, I think it's probably going to fail. And at that point, I'm going to have to figure out what's the next move to support mental health services, whether it's a stabilization center or something else, bolstering our mobile crisis team. Like, there's other options that we can do to help support this system. The stabilization center isn't the only answer. It does work really well in Dutchess County. So that's one of the reasons why we've tried to replicate it here. The other issue is Dutchess County doesn't have this issue because, does anyone know where they have it in Dutchess?
In industrial park.
Yeah, an industrial park owned by the county. So they bypassed that local control limit with the town because they don't need to go to the town when it's at a county facility. But it's also where the Department of Mental Health is and where there's a separate clinic. So people see that campus and then they start using metrics like, oh, there's all these emergency calls there. It could be for a completely different facility on the campus, not the stabilization center. So this was supposed to be a separate standalone spot, but I do think ultimately we'll learn in the next couple of weeks what's gonna happen at the town planning board. And when I did speak, if you can go back and play the tape and look at my comments, I spoke passionately. I stand by every word I stated, I shared, but my opening remarks is about my support for local control. And I do very much respect local town boards and planning boards. They have the important decision to make where they have to balance the community's concerns, the concerns of neighbors, and what's in the best interest of the community. So I'm not trying to just pass the buck to them, but the reality is there's a pending application before them and they'll have to make a decision in the next couple of weeks. So, but I do not think, for anyone that thinks like it's a done deal, it's done, I wouldn't say that. And once they make their decision, I'll have to do my job to make sure that we don't sacrifice $2.5 million to give it back to Washington, D.C., because we'll never get it back. So that's kind of where my focus is. I'm sorry, again, long answer, but there might be other people that have questions about that, so I did want to make sure I gave you a comprehensive answer. So thank you. You're very welcome. Other questions about, how about we just do that for a little bit? Other questions about the Stabilization Center, and then we can move on to other stuff, because I figured there might be some folks here about that. Yes, miss.
You just mentioned the funding. I had a question about that.
Okay.
It's funded by something called ARPA.
Mm-hmm.
I had to look it up. I had no idea what it was. But that says it's used for housing. And
Yeah.
Alabama got sued because they put up a jail with the money. And there's been some misuse of the funds that was created in, I think it was in March of 21 during COVID. It was COVID relief for
March, yeah.
housing.
It's not specific for housing, no. It's
That's what-
American.
That's what the Georgetown paper said.
Okay, well, I don't know about the Georgetown paper, but I could,
Georgetown law.
okay, I can tell you the county, being responsible fiscal stewards of your tax dollars, we contract with an independent firm, O'Connor Davies, highly reputable, as a compliance firm to make sure that the county does everything right. The county executive and legislature, before I took office, committed a portion of the American Rescue Plan Act dollars, the allotment, to towns and villages in the county as well. So every town, every village government has an allotment of ARPA separately from the county, but then they basically matched it again by getting a piece of the county share. And then separate from that, the county, before I took office, committed it for a number of projects. Some of those projects have fell through, and it was repurposed for other projects. But before we did that, we made sure we went through with our independent auditors to make sure that they were in fact ARPA eligible. There are like a series, to your point, there's a series of eligibilities, things that are eligible. For example, you can use it for paving, right? But you can only use so much for paving. You can't use all of your share for paving. You can use some of it for capital projects, but capital projects has a different deadline. For certain infrastructure and transportation projects, the deadline is, I think, September of next year, not December of next year. So there's a litany of different requirements we have to be mindful of. The biggest ones that were the most important was that all of the ARPA projects needed to be committed or contracted by the end of last year, which we did, and then all the money needs to be spent before the end of next year. So we're mindful of all of those things. Just to give you a couple other examples of ARPA funded projects, there's several state dollars that we got grant funding to support the radio project that's rolled out. Anyone that's been following that on the emergency services side, that was like talked about forever. People probably thought it was never going to happen. We're finally on the other end of it. It's been painful, but we're now with a better, stronger system. May not be perfect, but it's stronger. And the reality is, the prior administration was going to put some of ARPA for that. They didn't need to use the ARPA funding, so I got the legislature, convinced them to reappropriate it to support a new state-of-the-art fire and EMS training facility, which was completed and opened earlier this year. If you go over to the Veterans Memorial Park, the lower lot, you can see a new state-of-the-art facility. We got people from all over the state coming and checking it out. So there's flexible use for ARPA, but the deadlines are very important because otherwise the federal government can claw it back. And everything that we've spent the money on, we have a stamp from from O'Connor Davies, the independent auditors.
On this project?
Yeah, this is one of the two. Yes, this is definitely one of them. It's absolutely
The
ARPA
funding has
eligible.
already been appropriated for this?
No, it's been dedicated, right? It was passed by a resolution in 2022. It has not been spent. So dedicated but not spent, right? So we're not going to give them money for things they didn't do yet, right? So there's a possibility that the county will have to, if this doesn't happen, and I'm just saying that's a possibility, there's a possibility we'll have to eat like $100,000 where they were paying for designs and all their plans. But I'll gladly eat $100,000 to save $2.4 million, right? And reappropriate it for capital projects that we have already gotten approved as ARPA eligible, whether it's Fair Street or paving or something else, to make sure, and then maybe that frees up other dollars.
More useful for the town.
Yeah, well, if that frees up other dollars that we were going to use county taxation for, well, then that allows us to live to fight another day, and then it's on People USA or somebody else to find a location that works. And when they find one with community support, they know they have a willing, able, and partner in Kevin Byrne. But the reality is, my biggest concern is I'm not going to be the county executive to lose over $2 million, And in the interim, we do have a mental health crisis. I mean, there's a major issue with particularly our young people. The stabilization center was never for all young people or for all veterans. are all emergency service providers, but the reality is they are some of their most frequent users. And in Dutchess County and Poughkeepsie, during the school year, more than 50% of their clients are children, adolescents under the age of 18. I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I blame the COVID lockdowns and people living and trying to learn, in isolation. I blame legalization of marijuana. I blame, in some ways, society. It's so hard to parent. I have a 5-year-old at home. My wife has a demanding job. She's a PA at a very busy hospital in the Bronx. So we're constantly playing tag as we're going back and forth trying to raise our one child. It's very, very hard. But it also creates all these new challenges for children. So the stabilization center is not going to make it all go away, but we do need to do something. So it's not there's no silver bullet. But if this doesn't happen, I'm not going to sit on my butt and not do anything. We'll have to come up with another idea. I mean, that's what we do all the time in government. One door closes, we got to find another door to walk through. Other questions about the stabilization center, then I'll move on to other things. That's okay.
Is it going to have competition with that lifestyle place down at the barn?
I'm not sure what you're talking about.
There's a mental health facility, a very nice one, at the Barnes building that takes a litany of insurances.
I think that's the one that used to be
up.
upstairs. A different level of service, the stabilization center, and look, it's not a done deal. But the stabilization center doesn't provide medication treatment. It's really more of that early point of access, kind of like an urgent care where someone can stabilize, get rested, and get introduced to services. It's 100% voluntary, so no one can get mandated, like a cop can't force you to go. If someone's being forced by a medical order, they'll be going to the hospital, right? They won't be going to the stabilization center. There are different levels of licensing. That is not the level of licensing they're seeking at all. It's not a clinic. So no, it would not have competed with that. I don't believe so. I think that's the one that was upstairs, by the way.
It also says that it's insurance payment. Is that only for Medicaid?
No, so this is really the county's ARPA allotment I was trying to honor the commitment from the county back in 2022. That was basically for startup costs. It would be sustainable from their ability to bill insurance. So Medicaid, private insurance, whoever they can get to pay, but that's their model in Dutchess County as well. That's how it becomes sustained where they can bill for insurance.
And just one stupid question. How did it decide to come to Carmel?
They have a realtor. They tried to find as many facilities. They looked as long as they could. They have their own specifications that they have to meet for licensing, right? It's not like, let's just pick a space. There are state requirements that they have to meet. But at the same time, I think one of the positives for the location, I understand there's a lot of concerns and negatives from residents, but one of the positives was from the school districts. School superintendents from Brewster, Carmel, and Mahopac all provided letters of support for the application at that location. There's dense population in the area. It's the seat of the county. Heaven forbid someone does need to go to the hospital. It shouldn't be that primary purpose, but if they do need to go to the hospital, it's got a relatively close proximity to the hospital. It's got close proximity to the county's Donald B. Smith campus, which is where we have Social Services, Department of Health, 911 personnel, senior resources, right? So the senior resources have someone who's in anxiety or suffering from severe isolation or stress. They can say, you know what, I'll give you a ride to the stabilization center because maybe this isn't like the right level for you for service. Our senior center in the Hamlet of Carmel, they're giving you free food, meals, games. But if someone's really under stress and anxiety, it's close proximity. That's the positives. And I think that all went into their calculation. Not to be a dumping ground for anything, but it's also like where there's need, right? If you make it too far away from the population, then the people in need are going to have a tougher time getting the service. So that's part of the balance. But the reality is, again, local decision making, local control. There's a pending application before the town planning board, and I know a lot of them. I'm not going to be the one hammering them, trying to push them to do this. They're all highly respected individuals that care deeply about their town. And they know part of their job is to listen to community input. And I don't think it's going to be successful if you put it in a location where there's instant resentment from the community. I don't think that's going to happen. So I think you need community support wherever it's going to be. I think that's still reality. Yes, Miss. I saw your hand.
It's okay. I want to shift gears to another topic, if that's okay.
I'm okay with that because I know that was a very big issue, so I didn't want to dismiss it. But go ahead, Miss.
Yeah, so I want to talk about the +1 ADU program, which is, I don't know if you're aware, it's from New York State Homes and Community Renewal. What they did in 2022, they set aside $85 million for homeowners that want to either renovate a current accessory dwelling unit, which is like an accessory apartment or like a mother-daughter, or you can build a new one. So the good news is it's still around. The bad news is it's in every county around us except Putnam. So it's in Long Island, Westchester, and Rockland, Orange, all that good stuff. But it's not here. So I don't know when their next round of funding is, but if you can give me a point of contact with your office.
For this, are you saying this is state funded or locally funded?
It's state money, but either a municipality, so like in Poughkeepsie, it's the town of Poughkeepsie. They act as an intermediary. I think it's like you have to apply for funding, like to get the money, and then the town, or it could be a nonprofit. So in Westchester, it's actually Habitat for Humanity. They just act as a middleman, releasing the funds, overseeing the projects. I don't believe there's any burden on the town except for like doing the application. So I'm getting a point of contact with the program. I'm hoping to hear back like Monday, Tuesday. But I would, if there's someone in your office, or should we work with Town of Carmel? I don't know.
I would say, for starters,
Yeah.
we don't all operate in silos, right?
Sure.
So, it's easy for elected officials to say, call this person,
Yeah.
but we don't all operate in silos. Part of our job is to communicate with each other. Local zoning and permitting is all done in New York at the town and village
Yeah.
level. ADUs has become a bit of a hot topic with some, depending on where you're putting it. There's obviously a housing shortage in parts of the state. Some think ADUs are part of the answer. There's also concerns about oversaturating that and then having effects on neighboring communities. So that's where you really need to have that local input from your town and village. I'm not as familiar with that particular program, but if you send it to me, I'm happy to try to connect you with the right folks.
But this is mostly for people with disability
Okay.
that, like for example, my son is disabled and now there is shortage of housing for them.
Okay.
And that's the budget is for us to be able to build so he can be with us, close to us, not to, because there are no facilities.
That's very important to know. That's an important distinction.
It's in every county except Putnam County.
Okay.
I mean, it's great that we are having all this additional facility here for all these different things, but we have a high rate of people with disability in this county that we are not looking after.
So you're 100% right as far as a high rate, whether it's disability. It's one of the things that makes this county unique is we have, I think it's close to double the average is our aging population, our seniors. We have a very large senior population. So with that comes folks on Medicare, Medicaid, with disabilities. And for the extent that we can as a county, we've encouraged the ability to age in place. We do that. We do that with our senior centers. We do that with our programs from OSR and social services. We deliver home meals. There's lots of things that we do. We very much try to make our facilities more ADA compliant, accessible. I talked about digital access on our websites and stuff. One of the things I'm most proud of is that people, I scratch my head, like you think you'd be forced to by the Americans with Disabilities Act, but you're not. A lot of municipalities are grandfathered in. You went to the county office building when I took office, and there was no handicap ramp to get in that building. Our county clerk knows this because he helped us repurpose funding, and it was a big help because it blew a hole into the hallway into his office. But there's now a handicap ramp to get in that building. We've increased curb cuts. We've done all that to make our facilities more accessible to people of every ability. But to the extent that we can help people age in place with their families, we'd like to do that. Maybe you can give us a point of contact.
Yeah.
I'm happy to try to connect you with the right personnel. We'll give you a card. Dane, I might even have a card here too, but Dane, we'll give you a card before you leave. Here, I got a few in my pocket. We have done through OSR and DSS, you know, there have been some really successful examples. I think Legislator Crowley was a big part of this too. We helped a resident get reimbursed for the financial cost of a lift, a ramp and elevator, like kind of style lift to get into their home, because it also saves the government money to allow them to age in place. So like, and it's a better quality of
I
life.
think Putnam Housing Corp is a good resource for that as well.
Joel Green, yes, Putnam Housing Corp.
Putnam Housing Corp.
That was on the
is a
tip of my
very
tongue
good
too.
resource for the senior population, disabled population who might need to get some. It's not. They're not always technically a grant. It's basically. It's like they'll lend you the money, but as long as you stay in that residence for a certain period of time, it's washed. So Putnam Housing Corp is a great resource for things along those lines.
So,
Thank you
and
so
I'll
much.
email you.
Absolutely, and thank you. That's on the tip of my tongue. They do. They're a nonprofit that we contract with, and they get a contribution for their work. They're really great. Yes, sir.
I loved when you said the sales tax reprieve. Is it effective now?
Oh yes. So that was something I did.
I wonder if I even noticed it. We went to Kohl's, didn't we? I don't remember. I think sales tax
Yeah.
was charged.
So the state,
20% built on, so it was less.
so the irony, there's a little bit of like a story to bore you with this. Anyone know what the county sales tax rate is? The whole sales tax rate? It's 8.375. The whole bit's 8.375. So yeah, so 4% of that is the county rate. The other 4% is the state surcharge, the state sales tax rate, and the 0.375 is a surcharge to fund the MTA. Right now, one of the things that was asked of me when I was in the assembly, and was asked of Steve Katz when he was my predecessor, was to try to pass a state law to enable the county to do a sales tax holiday like Connecticut. Some states have a holiday where it's, quite frankly, I think it's a little more of a gimmick and it's a feel-good thing, where it's like, hey, look, no sales tax for these 2 weeks. But the reality is, people just change their buying behavior for that 1 week. It doesn't really stimulate economic activity. It doesn't really make sales tax less regressive. The state, in its wisdom, quite frankly, I hit Albany a lot. This is one where I'll say I didn't do the right thing. Albany, on its own, does not collect any sales tax on clothing and footwear under $110 because it acknowledges that you need a couple things in life, in society to live. Food and clothes, right? And particularly if you're thinking of yourself, if you have a single parent out there and you're trying to buy back to school clothes, that's where it really highlights its regressiveness, where it disproportionately hurts a lower income family. So the state zeroed out that sales tax. So if you bought it a couple of years ago, if you purchased something in Putnam, it was 4.375, the county and the MTA surcharge. So what the state allows us to do, it would not allow us to do a holiday, but it allowed us to opt into the state's program. Just pass a resolution, and we could do the same thing for a whole year. In my first year, I proposed it to the legislature. They passed it. So from March of 2024 to present, and it's going to be extended till March of 2027. We just got the legislature to extend it for another year. Not only does the state not charge sales tax, the county does not charge sales tax, and the county indirectly makes that MTA surcharge whole, and it goes away. So if you buy online, or if you buy at any of our brick and mortar stores, so long as it's under $110, and maybe the state will change that at some point because of inflation, but you don't pay any sales tax. So, I think the county needs to do a little better job promoting it because, it's good for our businesses for people to buy local. And it does, you add that up, honestly, if you're spending a couple $1,000s, it's a lot of money. And it's not like some gimmick, we're lessening the sales tax by like a fraction of 1%. It's zeroing it out. That to me is real relief in a targeted and responsible way.
So presently there should be no tax.
Correct, on those items.
I'll have to look at the bill because if Kohl's did charge, they made a mistake.
Yes, I went there last year and it was zero for Christmas. So I was there shopping.
Per transaction. Per item. No,
Yeah. Oh,
If you buy two $100 sneakers and you go to the register with $200 worth of stuff to buy, are you getting zero tax or are you getting tax on it because
no,
you're
because they're not going to punish you to go buy.
I don't.
multiple
I would
times.
hope it's
Pretty sure it's Brian.
I'm pretty sure it's Brian. Okay. The whole point is I support consumption-based taxation for a whole host of reasons. I think sales tax and consumption-based taxation is far more preferable than income taxes that punish people for working and moving up, in life. I think it's much more preferable than property taxes. But primarily because if you're gonna buy a Lamborghini versus a Hyundai, the wealthier the Lamborghini costs you more money, so you're paying more sales tax. But the reality is it still is regressive. But where it's most progressive is on specific essential items. And so these I think it targets that way, and it costs us about $2.5 million in lost revenue a year. So if you add up the 3 years of that exemption, that's $7.5 million in tax relief. People that are predominantly Putnam residents because of the online sales that gobble up a lot of that revenue. And then the property tax cuts that we've continued and added to is about another $2.5 million. It's about $10 million in tax relief over 3 years.
The property tax cut that you mentioned,
Yes.
that's for the tax we pay in January. The
Yes.
county.
It's
Not the school tax?
No, I can't.
That's the one I don't like because it's high.
Yeah.
It keeps going on, and now I don't have any kids in school, and I have to keep paying it. When does it end? I don't know that.
Woo! That's a tough
No,
answer.
I don't know. Is it a senior citizen? How old you have to be? I don't know.
So, I'll tell you, so this is where I'm if we have the ability to do better, we should do better. So there's some in government that are we have a tax cap, and I supported and advocated to make the property tax cap permanent when I was in the assembly. But the reality is there are some elected officials that are well, just raise the levy but stay under the cap and you're good. What that does is it creates a culture of never-ending tax increases, even when you don't need to raise taxes. My belief is, if you don't need to raise taxes, you shouldn't raise taxes. You shouldn't take more than you need. So, if we can lessen that total tab that you pay for as a property owner, the county property tax bill is on 9% of your total property taxes. So it's negligible compared to your school taxes, your town taxes. Maybe not Southeast. Southeast is they're able to leverage. They have a very large commercial tax base. So I'll be clear. But on average, countywide, it's 9% of your total county property tax bill. So my thing is, if I can lessen that within my authority, I ought to do that, and that's what I'm doing. I do not control the school taxes. I do not control the school boards. That, unfortunately, is driven by the school boards themselves, and a lot of the decisions made from Albany with the unfunded mandates that drive up the cost, and some of the collective bargaining agreements that they have at the schools.
So how do we as residents address just the school? Now, who do we go to? How do we say it's got to come down? We don't.
Well, I would say I think it's where the property tax cap is most effective. It's hard to get it to go down, but what I will say is why the property tax cap is so effective is it requires a 2/3 majority to supersede, right? It's based on inflation or 2%, right, over several years. But the thing that's really unique is how we pass our budgets. So to overcome a tax cap for a town, a lot of times that just means you need one extra vote. And the same thing with the legislature, for the county. Instead of needing 5 votes, you'll need 6 votes. Okay, it's a little bit of a higher threshold, but to overcome the property tax cap for the schools, it requires support from the people. Those budgets get voted on via referendum from the people. So it is harder to overcome the tax cap. So I think what the schools have done is tried to slow the growth of those taxes, and to the extent that Albany can either lessen those unfunded mandates or think creatively and get school districts to partner together. A big thing, I didn't mention it, but I'm very proud of, is I had to browbeat some people into submission to support it, but it's our partnership as a county with some of the school districts for the new early learning center based in Patterson. Most folks might not know this, and foolishly or shamelessly, I didn't know this until I was a state legislator and a county executive. We're one of the only states in the union where we are mandated, and it's by design, we're a large state. The county governments in New York are really the implementing arm of some of the state services that other states, the state government runs. One of them is early intervention and educational services for children with special needs in that pre-K, pre-kindergarten population. One of those categories is something called CPSE, the Committee on Preschool Special Education. I know this is like a mouthful, but it's the ages 3 and 4 pre-K that are special needs. The county is mandated to cover all the transportation costs for those services. And because we didn't have a lot of providers in the county, there are children with special needs that are 3 years old that were waiting on hours-long bus rides to go down to Valhalla and all over the outside in the Hudson Valley to get services. There's a lot of problems with that. One, it's a bad educational experience for that child. I don't think it's very humane for them to be waiting on a bus ride. And thirdly, it costs us a ton of money in transportation costs. So what we did, working with our health department and our tremendous team that have been remarkable, partnering with a new nonprofit in Patterson, Community-Based Services, in our school districts, we embraced what's called a braided model, where the school's UPK, Universal Pre-K program, is centralizing part of their student population in a shared facility with the county for the special needs children, which has now allowed us to provide an inclusive experience for those children, which has already anecdotally given us great outcomes where the school districts are saying, we don't think some of these children are going to need as much services when they go into kindergarten and traditional schooling, but it also has saved us close to $1 million over the length of that contract. So we're the first in this region to do that. We've already gotten recognized from a host of different groups. So, no, is that going to drive the school district's taxes down? Probably not, because even if I save them money, I can't make them cut your taxes. They're probably going to just reappropriate their savings for something else. But the reality is, it is still saving money, and it's thinking differently and partnering regionally with our local municipalities. And that's what we got to do. I mean, we also have a great new DPW shared services agreement that every town and every village passed via resolution. Our county legislature passed it. It's the first of its kind in the state, where we have our highway departments from every town and village, and our Department of Public Works have an intermunicipal agreement. So if and when they need to share services to support one another, like for example, in times of emergency, we don't need to have a dozen different agreements, because forever, if you go back decades, the highway super would have a handshake with someone, and that's how they did business. Okay, that's nice. Not really good for the liability protecting taxpayers. So then you get into the legalese, and then every town has an IMA with every other town and the county. It becomes a bit of a mess, a hodgepodge system. We got one uniform agreement that everyone signed on to, that the Highway Superintendents Association for the state is now looking to replicate in other counties. So we try to think differently, and if I can save the town money without costing the county money, I'm going to try to do that.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. I know that's not an easy, quick answer.
No, I know. Someone told me with 65 you get reduction by stories.
Well, yeah, state gives you an enhanced star. There's lots of exemptions that are available. Look, as a former state legislator, I would say it would be beneficial to at least freeze the property taxes on our seniors at a certain age, so like they're kind of locked in. It's easier for them to plan a retirement. But for those that say you're going to eliminate it, that's not fair. Think about everybody else. The tax burden then just gets shifted to everybody else. It would be catastrophic tax increases for everyone else. So, but the STAR system has been pretty popular. It started under George Pataki. It's been modified and tinkered a little bit over time. But that's one way to give some relief to it.
Okay, just to follow up on that a little bit, with
Yes, sir.
the BOCES system, will do a lot of that coordinated service, and there's funding that can come back through that. So I don't know that work that you're doing on the pre-K program is working with BOCES, but definitely should be looked at if it isn't.
BOCES is a great organization. You're right. They do some of the best examples of shared services within the school districts are done with BOCES. We actually did have some very preliminary conversations with them. I think that this model, this Early Learning Center in Patterson, right now, Brewster was on board, but there was a lot of doubt because the legislature did not immediately embrace it. The earliest of meetings, they refused to put it on the agenda. I had to go into the meeting, and you go on YouTube. It was an interesting meeting to watch. But the reality is, I don't care. It got done. I'm grateful, and I think this successful model is going to likely be expanded in other locations, so it can support more school districts. Brewster, I think Brewster just wasn't ready to buy in completely in the beginning. They wanted to, so I think for the next school year they'll be more interested. I think other schools would like to do something similar, but it has improved the service. And we had a nice little Thanksgiving lunch with the kids and their families. I had like at least 2 or 3 parents come up to me and said that they were going to be one of the families with their child was going to go down to Haverstraw. So
BOCES has coordinated programs all exactly like that in other areas, and that's why it's a good one to touch base with. I can give you more information.
Thank you. I know Rick represents some of those folks. And we partner with them on the culinary program. They have over at Tilly's, so great partnerships. This gentleman's been happy.
Hi, Eric Elhouse of Mayo Pack. So my question was about the websites and the relief programs. Specifically, there's a septic tank replacement relief program.
Okay.
And it takes a little bit of searching to find the actual website, and it just boils down to here's an email address, and if they don't respond, which they haven't yet, there's nothing going on. So is it possible to have either the website be done or maybe have it like a department so multiple people get the email address instead of one person?
See, this is one of the reasons why we have these forums. So that's community feedback. I haven't looked at that section of the website in a while. I'm happy to look at it. Maybe it's something we can try to enhance. We're always trying to move it along. It's a lot better than from when I started. If you remember, if anyone looked at it 4 years ago, it was cluttered with like billboard type of ads for golf course events and Tilly Foster. I very much want it to be more of a hub for human services and government the court functions of county government, right? For you to make it more user friendly. Before you wouldn't even know who the department head was. Now I mandated that every department head has their mug on their website with their name and title. So ultimately, it helps us all become more accountable, right? This is the person that, it all goes uphill, and then it goes to them, and then it ultimately comes to me. So there's also, JotForm is the vendor that we use, where you can click and submit information. The reason we use that is so we don't get inundated with spam from people in like Saratoga, and it kind of helps us drill down that people from the county are getting responded to first. But I know we've had issues with the septic replacement program. We've talked about it, particularly with some of the lake communities where they have issues with harmful algal blooms. If it's the program that I'm thinking of, there is the homeowner needs to contribute too. It requires participation from both, and unfortunately, we haven't had the level of success that we'd like as far as participation. And part of it was because that there needs to be investment by the property owner too. We have advocated for the state to broaden those categories, predominantly because I'm not sure where you live in Mayapack, but it has been a big issue for some of these communities that, decades ago, there were bungalows, for summer homes, and now they're full-time housing for people. And you do need to update that septic system. My friends at Lake Carmel know all about that.
You just described my house. And,
Okay.
And I'm uphill from a lake, and to the left is watershed. So.
Well, that might make it easier. That's probably why you're eligible. Is
only if
because
they
of that.
respond to that email.
Hey, Kevin.
Okay.
Maybe he should call environmental health.
Sure. Well, we had personnel changes with environmental health. That's why I didn't want to say that because I think there's a job posting for it. I'm not sure who's in that position right now, but it is our environment. It's traditionally handled by our environmental health director. It was Sean Rogan. Brian, I think, has been handling some of that workload, and our public health director, Brian Rodriguez, is the one that oversees the entire health department. We can certainly connect you with them too, because we want to make sure that you can respond to that.
That would be great. Could
Sure.
I have one of your business cards?
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, the information on the business card is the same information on the county website. It's not like I'm giving you like my cell
The
number.
bat phone number.
Yeah, it's the same type of stuff here. So I really appreciate the turnout. Oh look, we're joined by our Southeast Town Supervisor, Nick Durante. Thanks for being here, Nick. I appreciate it.
I messed up the
It's
time.
good. And Wendy, who's the Southeast Town Council. I should have given you Are you still on the planning board there? So, okay. Do you like my comments about how planning boards are important?
Kevin,
I tend to disagree on Crawford in regards to some of their, I think they're all good people, but I think you can get more through there southeast. Good luck.
Maybe.
Kevin, just the gentleman
Yes.
looking for talking about STAR, enhanced STAR, and things like that. The best resource for that is to go to your town assessor's office and ask what you might be entitled to, and more importantly, make sure you do that before March 1st. So that's called taxable status day. And you go after March 1st, it won't affect your that year's school tax bill.
All right, I can do that. That's the one on Route 22.
Correct.
I mean, I have to make sure I go before lunch, because as soon as the thing goes down, oh, we're at lunch. And I'm like, I said, not my job, I work through lunch.
That's the court, that's the court window. In all fairness.
It's not the
That's like in
town
town.
offices.
What's that?
That's the court offices, not the town offices. We are open till 4:30 every day.
So other questions?
You're doing a great job.
Try.
Oh,
Look,
that's-
I don't. Look, none of us are perfect, right? But that's one of the reasons why we do these things, right? So I can, like, if there's an issue with a website that I can fix, like, there's only so many things I can get my hands on at once. So we got about 27 different departments or divisions in county government. We consolidated some of them to save money. General services has been, aces. I'm trying to leverage better contracts in the interest of our taxpayers. The extent that we can do piggyback contracts with our towns and villages to help them, we do that. We have bi-monthly meetings with our town supervisors and village mayors, where we try to bring in a guest department head to let them know about the services the county's offering. There's almost 700 employees, so I don't pretend to know all things, but we try to stay on top of it. And to the extent that I learn about new issues that we can address, we want to get ahead of it. So I don't just, there's some elected officials and politicians out there that will only do this when they're running. I have prided myself on doing this every year, as long as I can, and I try to customize them to make them accessible to folks. So I appreciate you being here on a Sunday afternoon. Yes, sir.
I live in Trina, Carmel.
Yes.
I've contacted you, contacted me. Would you be ever interested, we're a heavy senior citizen complex of 216 condos, a lot of people.
Sure.
Would you be interested in talking to us?
Sure.
Seniors have so much to offer, and you have a lot to offer us. And I think if it's exposed more, it would be good for you and us.
Absolutely. I know I spent a lot of time over the years knocking on doors over there. Maybe even knocked on your door at one point.
Probably did.
But
Let the center and bring it right in.
yeah. So I've been there many. I know before we had. I think you missed some of the more robust discussion in the beginning.
I did.
So by the
That's why I didn't
stabilization
say
center.
anything.
No, and I get that. And I know there was presentations, whether it was People USA, and we tried to be a facilitator and arrange some of those meetings. I think ultimately I said, look, I respect local decision making. I think the planning board's going to make their decision. It's certainly not a done deal. I think we need to. I respect local control, local government, and we're going to see where that lands. I hope, honestly, the sooner they make a decision, the better, because I have deadlines that I need to be mindful of to repurpose money from, because I am not going to be the one that surrenders $2.5 million to the federal government.
Well, just to give you a little background, I'll be very short. I lived there almost 17 years. I was the first resident board member to our HOA.
Okay.
So the two items that I had to obstacle was our responsibility, and number two was Arms Acres. It took us 3 years to solve that problem, and we cost us money building trees and a fence and all that. That's our biggest concern for us as safety. And I've contacted our chief of police. He's more than eager to talk. Our town supervisor's been great, a couple of councilmen. So if we can bring all of you together, maybe,
Sure.
that would be like ideal.
If there's things that try to enhance and make people feel safer, that's important. One of the things that we talked about, the first thing I wanted to address was the assault on the trail and some of the mitigation efforts that we took immediately, and WEN's policies that predated my time as executive were brought to my attention. We terminated them immediately. We do not give out county-funded tents, or I think that was like some sort of state grant, but like the reality is we don't do that. We work with our Department of Public Works and our Sheriff's Office. When things are brought to our attention, we try to address them humanely, introduce folks to services. You know, and there are temporary housing assistance programs that we can avail them of, and sometimes they don't want that because it's at a hotel or motel. But the reality is, you know, it's illegal to encamp along a public space. We take that seriously. So we try to address those issues, and we have cameras going up in some of the more sensitive areas that the sheriff's office has identified, and that's through working with Sheriff Hess. And it's upsetting that, you know, you have an incident, and then someone gets released with an appearance ticket, and then predictably in a couple of weeks, the person fails to appear before court. And we all could have said that was going to happen, right? I think we all knew that was going to happen. You know, all you do is Google the individual's name, and you can see there's a history from upstate New York. Not the kind of person that you think is going to come back to Carmel. So, I mean, maybe that's a good thing he didn't come back to Carmel, but I don't want him. I don't want that person to reoffend in another area. Forget about even. Look, I love Putnam, but I don't want our neighbors in Somers to experience something similar either. That's not being a good neighbor. And we've had to deal with issues like that too. So, but I'd be happy to set up a time.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I will hang around too. Like, if folks want to talk to me kind of individually, I'll stick around. You don't need to ask. Some folks don't want to ask in a public setting. That's okay. But I'm here. This guy was one of the scoutmasters in the local. Am I embarrassing? So Dick, Mr. Eppinger was a scoutmaster in Carmel Troop 14. I was in Carmel Troop 1. And now my son is in Pac 71. They marched in the Thanksgiving Day parade. It's awesome. They had a life-sized Pinewood Derby float. It was pretty cool. You'd be impressed. And we were at the Thunderbird game this year at FTR Park. Not Silent Art, but it was cool. Any other questions? No? Thank you, everybody. I really appreciate your time.